Hi, everybody. This is Kristen Clark here, managing broker at Clark Group, Compass Real Estate, Seattle, Washington. And welcome to our video chat. We're diving into a game-changing topic in the real estate industry, and it's condoization and unlocking property potential in the Growth Management Act urban growth areas. And today I am sitting with Terrence Wilson. He's the founder of Wilson Law Group. And he's going to shed light on this subject for us. And he's the go-to guy for all things real estate. So he'll navigate the ins and outs of these recent policy changes and basically helping people understand how they can make the most out of their properties through what's called condoization and development. So warm welcome. Thank you so much, Terrence, for letting me be here and taking the time to talk to me about this.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we met at a recent class Seattle-King County Association of Realtors put on, and you piqued my interest because this whole topic, I mean, I knew a little bit about it, but it's huge, huge.
Yeah.
And the way you really got the interest rolling, you're like, it's the wild, wild west.
Yep.
Is there gold in your backyard? Are you sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars in your backyard? So I'm like, what does all this mean? What is condoization? So that's why I want to pick your brain and get your insights and information on it. So let's unpack it. What is it?
Well, we're making up new words, right? Condoization, condominiumization, and certainly the DADU, ADU nomenclature. There's just a lot of different things now that folks have either heard about or maybe haven't heard about. And so I do like calling it the Wild Wild West. In fact, I grew this beard last summer. I'd never grown a beard, full beard in my whole life. And I grew it and I decided not to shave it because in a sense, it almost represents in my own body a sense of we're in a pioneering time. We're in kind of a prospecting time. As you said, unlocking the potential, the gold in your backyard, so to speak, or in your side yard. You've got a lot of different things coming together to create this perfect opportunity for really a revolution in real estate, in my view, because in 30 years of being in this industry, I've never quite seen anything like this where we have an affordability issue. Obviously, I got kids in their 20s now that are, coming out of college and they can't afford to buy a house in the city in a desirable neighborhood. You got availability issues that are part of the problem. And so you've had a movement now for the last 4 or 5 years where Seattle and Kirkland were the first two cities that proactively instituted in their building codes the provisions to allow for 3 dwelling units on single family lots. And that's a big deal because single family has always been kind of seen as, unless you have a really large property that can be subdivided into new single family lots, which most people don't have a big enough property to do that.
Isn't it like it used to be it has to be a minimum of 5,000 square feet or over to subdivide it?
Right. It depends on the jurisdiction, but in Seattle, that's a common zone is the 5,000 minimum. So how many people have 10,000 or more that is situated in such a way that you could evenly divide it into 2 5,000 square foot lots? It's hard to find. And most of that good land has been used up and divided already. So what you do have a lot of, though, whether it's a 5,000 zone or other of the single family zones and in other jurisdictions, is lots of space in people's side and backyards where there's room to put things back there. And that's where this introduction of the accessory dwelling unit has come on board. So accessory dwelling unit, abbreviated as ADU. And a lot of people will colloquially refer to this as, if it's an attached, they'll say it's an AADU. And if it's detached, they'll call it a DADU. Detached accessory dwelling unit. And so the condominiumization, for my part, I mean, a lot of folks see the benefit even without using the condominium, just having the ability to create another dwelling unit or 2 on your single family lot and being able to either rent that space out, or maybe you want to age in place as a retired person who's on a fixed income and thinking, I don't want to leave the neighborhood that I'm in, but I can't afford even the property taxes on my main house. Gives you an option to move into maybe the smaller house and downsize, maybe rent out the big house. But for our part, the legal work that we do in condominiumization is essentially separating the ownership and creating a community there of 2 or 3 owners that can navigate their separate ownership in a way very similar to what a traditional subdivision would feel like.
So no longer are the needs for all the subdivision and all the scrutiny from the city and all that tape has been removed. And so how does that look? I mean, like condoization, that it is a weird word, and it's... So how many can you put on a lot? And let's give Seattle an example as an example. So if I live on a 5,000 square foot lot, but it up to an alley and I have a main house, what can I do?
Yeah. Well, right now you can do 3 dwelling units total, and whether you're on an alley or not, I've got some examples of non-alley sites that are only 33 or 34 feet wide by 100 feet deep. You're talking about a 33 to 3,400 square foot parcel, which is a fairly small parcel, that were created over time. And when lots were originally platted 150 years ago, and leading up into the 20th century, you have a lot of small postage stamp sized lots, I would say 25, 30, 35 feet wide by 100 or 120 feet deep. And those lots are still grandfathered in many cases and able to be treated as a development site, even though they're smaller than a 5,000 square foot zone might require today. And on that size of a lot, even without an alley, you can put 3 units. And we've got some examples of the attached. And in Seattle, if you have 3 units, 1 has to be attached. There are other jurisdictions like Kirkland and others that are coming on board now that don't require any of the units to be attached. But in Seattle, as an example, we've got 33, 34 foot wide lots by 100 that have single family, an attached, and a detached for 3 units. And the single family and the attached, 3 stories tall, rooftop decks with views, all happening on a 3,400 square foot lot with no alley.
Crazy. Oh my gosh. So people, I think what the people are having difficulty wrapping their brains around, so they can live in their main house and sell off these back ADUs, DADUs, and they could still live there, but they just don't, do they own their land?
Yeah. Common misconception. People will say things like, well, isn't the condo, the HOA owns it, or the HOA is somehow involved in the ownership? And so they'll say, isn't subdividing through the normal subdivision process preferable because it's fee simple? Words like that get thrown around, and fee simple just means that no one else has control over your land that you own, that your unit or your lot. A condo, in this sense, we call these airspace condominiums. And by referring to it in that way, it helps differentiate it from maybe a traditional idea of what a condominium would be, which is an apartment style or high-rise style condominium where the unit that you own is what people will say is the walls in. So I own from the walls of my interior space inward. That's my unit. Everything outside of that is still not owned by the HOA, but there's probably some form of common element or limited common element that the HOA would maybe be responsible for maintaining. And so those concepts translate a little bit, but this is kind of a new paradigm in the sense that an airspace condominium says, I'm going to draw my condominium unit on a survey map much the way I would do a subdivision. It's going to be a set of lines that I draw that are going to be inclusive of not only whatever the building is, if it's a single family home or if it's a attached or detached accessory dwelling unit, but it's going to include also my yard and sidewalk area or walkways, whatever it is that you have inside that space. The condominium unit is a horizontal plane, airspace meaning it's from the ground, we draw the boundary up into the air. And so it goes all the way up. In that sense, it really functions and feels, even though this is not an entirely new concept because there have been airspace condominiums done historically, for sure with the DADU and the ADU, and even now some of the new house bills allowing for duplex, triplex, quadplex, it's a helpful paradigm to think about the word condominium in this sense as more like a subdivided lot that the unit of the condo is from the ground up into space.
Okay. So what about other things that used to cause issues for people trying to do this, like setbacks and things like that? Is that being lifted a little bit too?
To some degree. I mean, so one thing I guess helpful to back up a little bit and understand that what Seattle and Kirkland have done for the last 4 years has done such a great job of addressing our housing affordability and our availability needs that the state took notice and said, we're going to make it a requirement for every city in Washington that's under the Growth Management Act, under a certain population size, required to do the same kinds of things. Mm-hmm. So 3 dwelling units or more per lot everywhere. And so in that sense, it's something now that's going to apply to every city that is in the state of Washington. So we are getting calls from Spokane and Bellingham and Vancouver. Crazy. But I think, there's a hub of population that's in the greater Seattle area. So for sure from Seattle to Kirkland and maybe some of the other surrounding cities like Bellevue, Renton, and others, you are going to see an inflow of people that want to develop their properties in this way. The lot that you go get your permit on, whatever it is you're getting a building permit on, that's going to be looked at as a parent parcel to that particular city. So when they look at setbacks and so forth, as you mentioned, they're going to be looking at the overall site and saying, what can we build on this site? And that's where this new building code that allows for all these cities now to be giving you 3 or more dwelling units on the site is very revolutionary because that's what you can build. The condominium is a form of ownership. It is not about the type of structure. If it's a duplex or a triplex or a row house, townhome, single family, accessory dwelling unit, none of that really even is relevant to the condominium. because the condominium is just creating ownership. I always tell people that if you go down to some of the Lake Washington boat mooring slip areas where people store their boats, the slip that they put their boat in might be a condominium unit that is owned by somebody. They can sell it. It has a certain value. They can get a loan on it. It has a tax parcel number, all of those kinds of things as a condominium unit. And then the dock areas or the areas maybe where you store things in a locker in a building on the main part of the site would be some form of shared space, like a common element. And that just gives you a paradigm to think, okay, condominium has nothing to do with what it is that's built. It could be a parking lot, it could be a boat mooring marina. And so here we're talking about DADUs and ADUs as a form of construction. And so whatever the building plans say they are is kind of not relevant to the condominium, because the condominium is just saying, now that you've gotten a permit to build whatever it is, with your setbacks and your storm drainage and your floor area ratios and lot coverages and all the kind of development standards apply to the building permit stage. And so getting the highest and best use you can out of what you can build. And then once you have that in place, the condominium just lays on top of it as a form of ownership.
Okay. So when is this all taken? Like when are we going to start seeing more and more of this? Like what is the date?
Well, so the way that the House bills passed to create this requirement for all cities to roll out is something that has to take effect within 6 months of the next comprehensive plan updates for each city. So every city has a different date for when they're updating their comprehensive plan. None can be past the end of this year, though. So in order to have a 6 month from the time of your comprehensive plan update, it means in no case will it be later than the summer of next year. And many cities have already rolled out their comprehensive plan, and now they're in that 6 month period and slowly rolling out their new changes so that they can be ahead of the deadline that's looming out there for every city to be on board by summer of 2025. So places like Everett right now, as of today in April of 2024, already have theirs. City of Kent already has theirs. Obviously, Seattle and Kirkland already have theirs. And you're seeing a rollout now, city by city, of all these different cities, wrestling with the fact that while they were told that they have to do these particular arrangements in their building plans, there are some discretionary things they can pick and choose from as to how they implement it. And so they're all working through how do they want to implement these new mandates.
Okay. And I know that I read something about if it's close to a like a light rail or something like that, then the number of units per lot goes up, or what is that?
Exactly. So that's why I say it's 3 or more, because right now we've been in this realm of having accessory dwelling units, which are smaller and limited number of square footages. There's a baseline in the new code that says it has to be at least 1,000 square feet, which is what Seattle uses. But Kirkland has 1,200. Other cities may have a little bit more square footage provisions that they allow. So there are some deferential and discretionary things that the cities can do. But in the code that's being adopted now, it also talks about duplex, triplex, quadplex type developments. And so there's a couple of House bills that passed that are both being rolled out here in this next year. And what we're going to find is if you're within a proximity of transit and so forth, then there'll be mandates for even additional numbers of units, which can get up to even as much as 6 units per single family lot in those kind of cases. So you could see a duplex and maybe a quadplex all in a single family lot and having 6 units that can all then be condominiumized.
That's crazy. So when you say mandate, if I'm a homeowner in Green Lake, which I am, so when you say mandate, does that mean that I have to do this, or what? So I'm required, or can I still keep my lot in my huge backyard and just have my own pleasant surroundings?
The mandate doesn't really apply to the homeowner and what you have to do with your property. It's a mandate that says to all the cities, you have to allow and permit this type of development if somebody wants to. But of course, lots of people will say, I don't want to have smaller lot. I don't want to have a new dwelling unit in my backyard. So I'm going to leave things the way that they are. And so the mandate is really about telling all the cities, here is a list of things you need to do moving forward to address the housing crisis that we have. And with Seattle and Kirkland already have proactively having been doing that, you have a good body of work to be able to compare what works. But every city will have their own rollout as to how they specifically implement it.
Okay. And so like if I wanted to proceed with something like this, this is what you do. So I go to you, walk me through what that looks like, how much it costs, and then all the steps involved.
Yeah. So a little background on me. Before I was a land use attorney, I used to own and operate a land surveying company. And the important distinction for that is because being part of my history, the surveying side of it is how you make the drawings that create the condominium units. So a map from a surveyor creates a condominium alongside of some legal documents. And that's what now as a lawyer, what our firm deals with is all the legal documents. The main things that are done to set up a condominium are, number one, you have to have an HOA. And for a lot of people, the idea of even having an HOA was like, well, if we're doing condominiums on every one of these single family lots, that's a lot of HOAs. Yeah. Yes, it is. But these HOAs are not really a traditional type of HOA in terms of how much functionality and work they're having to do. For example, the budgets for these small 2 and 3 unit little infill condominiums typically only have 2 things in them: a $10 fee that you pay every year to the Secretary of State to keep the HOA active, and then an insurance policy. That may be the only things that you pay for, and they both can be done once a year. So very limited in terms of what the HOA has to do, but it has to be formed. And so you have the incorporation of an HOA, and then you have a declaration, which is kind of like a fancy set of CC&Rs that are done for these, that also go in tandem with the recording of the surveyor's map. And that is all that's needed to create the condominium. After it's been created, there are other legal things that you may need to do. For example, if you're going to sell your units, you have to provide buyers a public offering statement. And so there's a package of documents for disclosure and consumer protection that's given to the new buyers. We also at our firm assist all of our clients with the transition after owners have purchased these to help the new owners become the managers of the HOA. So we have an HOA transition meeting that we do over Zoom. It only takes about an hour to an hour and a half. And in that process, I walk through the new homeowners. I've actually done every one of our HOA transition meetings over the thousands of projects that we've done over the last 5 years. So I've met every single new homeowner that has purchased a unit in one of these accessory dwelling unit type scenarios or condominium type of scenarios. And so in terms of what's needed to be set up, it's probably $5,000 to $10,000 worth of legal work that's done. You'll have some amount of charges that are needed for the surveying that's being done. So you'll have some cost for that. And then the combined surveying and legal costs is really all there is, because there's no jurisdictional review, unlike a subdivision that has to have a public notice and an application and fees paid to the city that's reviewing it and so forth.
So during the class, you said if you can permit it, you can condoize it. So the permitting is what part of what you were just saying?
Yeah, so the permitting is really building permits. Okay. You're going in, and a lot of these cities have pre-approved plans now.
Yeah.
I was at a recent meeting with the city of Kirkland where the planner was there and kind of touting that, hey, in our city here, I don't think this is necessarily to be taken literally, but we can approve a plan in like 2 weeks. And so for those people who have tried to go through and get permits before for building permits, they know how difficult things can be. If it's a pre-approved plan, it means the whole building's already been reviewed, it's already been approved. All that we're doing now is citing it on the property, making sure that the site plan's going to work.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So, and also during the class, they were talking about there's 2 requirements. One, it either has to be affordable housing or built green in order to do this, or is that true?
No. So there are some additional provisions that cities will give if you do affordable housing, meaning creating a unit that can be sold at a price that's at a certain adjusted income level. Or certain green, you might get other provisions like an additional unit that you can build on the property, or you may be able to get other concessions in the building permit process. But you can do a standard build out with no other than bare minimum permitting requirements for built green and without any particular consideration for affordable housing, special accommodations, and just do the standard codes that way, and that's fine as well.
Okay. So what advice would you give? I mean, like as an agent, is this going to change my world? I mean, what's going to happen to the industry? What do you think is?
I think in some sense it's already happened. I mean, I tend to think about this as the first ship has already sailed. We've had 4 or 5 years now with thousands of units. Our firm alone has probably done 3,000 to 4,000 units in so many of these condominium projects, and that's just one firm. There's other firms out there that also sometimes will work on these kinds of projects, and that's already a body of work that's happened for the last 4 or 5 years. And it's really already caught the attention of a lot of the development community, real estate developers and investors, agents and folks. But it's a steep learning curve. People are still learning about what it means. And so in that sense, I feel like the first ship kind of took off already. And those people who got on that first ship are already kind of part of the initial pioneering foundational stage. There's another ship here, I think, lined up, which is one, all the jurisdictions that are now rolling this out everywhere else. And number 2, more knowledge is now getting its way out through these kinds of meetings and presentations. We're just getting the word out about what these things are, what they mean. It's helping people become part of this next wave of land development and real estate, such that I think it's still on the front end. We're still in the pioneering phase, but as far as how it's going to impact, it's already impacting. You take a neighborhood that maybe has an average house price for a new house of being $1.5 million to $2 million, and now an accessory dwelling unit selling for $800,000. It opens up an opportunity for buyers as well as existing homeowners who maybe want to downsize or adjust to be able to have options. But I think from a real estate agent, broker in the community, understanding that this is similar to a subdivision, but it has condominium pieces to it, HOA. There's a lot of different terms and ideas that maybe you can borrow from knowledge in the past, but it really is a new thing.
Yeah, right. I'm just wondering, like, if I have clients saying, when should I sell? And they're thinking they're going to retire soon. Am I selling them short by saying, well, now's fine, or should they wait until this is really rolling out and they can capitalize on the money in their backyard?
I think that if they're in a jurisdiction, not Seattle, not Kirkland, or not one of these other cities that have already rolled out the new plans, it might make sense to wait because the new rules are going to open up opportunity that's going to raise the value of the property in terms of what it can do. And so we talk about it in a sense, the pioneering Wild Wild West theme is kind of like we're in prospectors type fields here. We're talking about, rather than being the classical gold rush folks that were bringing their pickaxes and their shovels and their pans to sift for gold, right? We're more of in a virtual set of tools where you're looking at architectural and legal and survey and engineering, figuring out what are the tools that are needed to be able to realize this particular value or this gold that's in your yard in terms of its ability. So it has dramatically affected because the people who know are equipped with the tools and can decide, do I want to do a project, or at least know that I can value my property if I'm going to keep it or sell it in ways that will keep the value in my pocket, versus people coming in saying, we'll buy your property at a low price, and then being able to turn around and sell it after they do the condominium on it. I mean, some folks are buying up old homes, doing the condominiums, knowing they're going to put an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard, and they're selling the existing home right after they purchase it at the same price and getting basically a free lot in the backyard to build their accessory dwelling unit.
That's crazy. Oh my gosh. Wow. So yeah, I was just going to ask, have you seen that kind of scenario happen? And where is that happening? So you're saying not Seattle, like where is the bulk of your work been?
Most of the work that we've done have been in the Seattle, Kirkland areas where they've already had these rules in place for the last 4 or 5 years before the state mandate came in. We're seeing more now spreading out into other cities as their different cities are unrolling their actual implementation of the state mandate. So primarily the greater Puget Sound area. I mean, you can always do condominiums in anywhere in the state, but I think with the building codes being now what they are and the new provisions that are required for the cities, take for example the owner occupancy covenant, which is a historical thing that most cities have said you can do an accessory dwelling unit, but the owner of the property has to live in one of the two units. So you can do a condominium on that, but now you have this other thing on your title that's saying that I do a condominium, but then at least 6 months of the year, the owner of one of those two condominium units has to be living in there in order to comply with that covenant. Well, under the new code, that's an example of something that's now been erased and told to the jurisdictions you can no longer have an owner occupancy covenant. So it's things like that. It dramatically impacts sort of the freedom and the flexibility of what people can do with their property.
Yeah. It's the Wild Wild West. Is there gold in your backyard?
I think to be able to answer that question effectively, advice that I would give that I hear frequently from folks that are kind of in this area of real estate development is to surround yourself with a team of professionals. Find out who the surveyors, architects, engineers, real estate agents, lenders, attorneys that have some experience in this area, and assembling a team to do an assessment of what the potential value of your property is, because there's more than just what you can build in terms of how many dwelling units. It might be an accessory dwelling unit or two. Maybe it's a duplex, triplex, quadplex under the new multifamily kind of arranged structures. But it may also be looking at your property in its own traditional ways, which is how many lots do I maybe have here to begin with? What if I've got a double lot? What if I've got a grandfathered historical lot? What if I have an ability to work with my neighbor and adjust boundaries, and we get an extra lot or two by working together as neighbors rather than independently without working with one another? Because whatever you start with, that's the number of lots you can then build whatever the new codes are allowing you to build. So if I can start with 2 or 3 of something rather than 1 of something and build 3 or more on each of those, I might be able to go from something I have right now that's considered 1 tax parcel, but maybe it's got 2 or more lots in there, and each one of those gets 3 dwelling units on it that can be condominiumized. And soon you can see something that goes from 1 to 6 or 9 by just being able to figure out how to assess the feasibility and the value of the property. So yes, there's definitely a lot of gold out there, so to speak, in terms of value that can be unlocked with the proper expertise.
All right. So 9 units times 800,000 minimum. And you're sitting, I mean, think about retirement for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Or just investing. I mean, real estate's always been the best investment you can make.
Right.
And now it seems to, I mean, like you said, it's the gold rush.
Right.
So.
I'm going to give you an example. Someone pays $400,000 to $500,000 for a vacant piece of land or a tear down house just for the dirt. And then they go in and build a single family and a accessory dwelling unit that's attached and an accessory dwelling that's detached. The selling values of all those three things added up as condominiums might be around $3 million, $3.5 million in total sales. The cost of the $400,000 or $500,000 to buy the property and the cost of maybe putting in $1.5 to $2 million in to build them out, you're still making $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 potentially on well-situated properties. And that's for one postage stamp little 4,000, 5,000 square foot lot. Now, obviously, this is a rolling of the dice, so to speak, because you can run into sensitive areas, tree ordinances, neighbor issues, easements, utilities. There's any number of things, and that kind of gets back to the surrounding yourself with an efficient team that can look at the various moving parts in these types of projects to figure out what are my obstacles and how do I make sure that whatever it is I'm embarking on is in the end going to be worth it.
So if I had clients that want to look into this, get really educated, get the right team, is the best route to talk to you? And then you could set them up, or how do they find surveyors and I know how to find you, but with everything else that's needed, is there a one-stop shop that, or how do I just feel like it all makes sense, but it still feels so like.
It's very compartmentalized in terms of different people have different skill sets and different focus areas. I think the primary ones you need to have are an architect or designer who can kind of look at feasibility from what can I build on this site, because I'm going to design that in whatever way I'm going to design the site, which is going to take advantage of all of those new mandates that are required of the jurisdiction. So you're looking at setbacks and storm drainage and utilities and topography and all that kind of thing. But in order for the architect to even be able to do that, they may need information from a surveyor about the exact square footages and the slopes and the different things that might need to be measured. So you're going to need to have these various professionals, maybe a biologist for a wetland if you have a sensitive area or something like that. You might have an arborist to deal with some tree questions about what can I remove, what can I replant, those kinds of things. So I think a team, but I think it emanates out of the architect as a designer who would then tell you what other professionals need to be added to the team for them to be able to do proper design. And then, of course, on the legal side, having a good attorney who understands the ins and outs, not just how to do a condominium, but how to understand the underlying grandfather lots, reading a title report, understanding easements and restrictions that might already be on the property, much less the ones that we would be adding in order to do the condominium.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay, well, my mind's spinning here. I'm bracing for the next several years to see how this all plays out. It's going to change the landscape. And what about parking? I didn't ask you about that.
Yeah, so parking is one of those things that it'll be jurisdiction specific as to exactly how they implement it. That's part of the discretion that certain cities will have. But to give you an idea, in Seattle, for example, one of the primary places you see these, there are no additional parking requirements for the accessory dwelling units. There may be an existing parking requirement for the single family home that is there, or if you're building a new single family home, it may have a parking requirement. Oftentimes that'll be done in a garage or in a space on the property. A lot of our clients, despite the fact that the jurisdiction may not require parking, may opt to provide parking. And Kirkland as well doesn't require parking, but a lot of folks will say, well, I understand the idea is more people that want to live in the urban areas are going to be taking transit opportunities for other types of transportation. And again, if they're not having to drive out from the suburbs an hour away, it's less traffic coming into the town, which will hopefully also affect overall traffic congestion and issues too, by just having people being able to be situated closer to jobs. You think about the people that are buying the $700,000-$800,000 homes in the city. A lot of people in the service industry and so forth that have to live an hour away now can live near their job. And so from that standpoint, there's some good incentive reasons why there aren't additional burdens placed for parking. Whatever our clients want to do in terms of adding additional amenities, there's lots of things that you can do with these projects that maybe aren't required by the building department in the particular city you're in, but may make sense to actually build into the design of the project to make it a more marketable and pleasing place to live.
Yeah, because I heard the number, the population growth. I can't remember what it is, but it's just there's the way it's going right now, there will be no housing.
And a million more people in the next 15 to 20 years, and where are they all going to go, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's the question. So that's why this whole thing comes up, right?
Yeah.
So
I'll mention this too. There's some interesting. This is on the always talking about being pioneering and progressive and what's next. A House bill was just passed that is called the co-housing bill. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's talking about a kind of dormitory setting where you have people who have spaces that they rent out that are their own space to use. And then they have common spaces like maybe a kitchen or a living room that might be a place that's shared with other owners or other folks who are renting. I've suggested at least exploring in cases like that a similar concept to what we're doing with the accessory dwelling units and the duplex, triplex, quadplex, which is what about an entry-level ownership opportunity instead of an $800,000 affordable accessory dwelling unit in Seattle or a $1.2 million affordable accessory dwelling unit in Kirkland? What about a $300,000 or $400,000 condominium unit that is a co-housing arrangement where I'm an entry-level person and that's what's affordable to me, but now I can own rather than rent, create value and equity just like you would in owning a normal house, and over time be able to sell that or rent that and have actual ownership and get into the real estate game.
yeah. So would it look like a house, a single family house, and you're like you buy a room in a basement, and that's yours, and that is crazy. That's mind blowing.
So this is just new ways of taking now where we're heading and thinking outside the box, thinking
Right.
about how are there creative ways that we can address the million people that are going to need a place
And
to
all the
live.
students, I mean, like so many college students, they're like, I can't buy a house. I mean, I got all these loans to pay, and I'm priced out. If I want to buy a house, I got to move over to Eastern Washington or something,
Exactly.
So
Totally.
yeah, so it's pretty exciting.
It is
Very exciting. Okay, well, anything else that, what I would love? If you could do the soundbite like you did in the class, like, I forgot how you did it, but you were like, it's the Wild Wild West. There's gold in your backyard. Whatever it was. And then like a little summary of what you see. I know we've already talked about all this.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking sound bites for different.
Well, I'll give you a couple of sound bites. So one of the funny things is my kids kind of helped me up and make up this moniker, but we called it "Who's Your Dadu?" And "Who's Your Dad" is a play on the words there, but to the concept of just being able to think about accessory dwelling units and other forms of housing in the condominiumization. But certainly this wild, wild west, the idea being that with a condominium creation of separate ownership, you're talking with an architect, your surveyor, you're a lawyer, and you're not even going into a city or a municipality to have any review of a subdivision. It's all done kind of in a you're being a prospector in terms of figuring out how am I going to create this community in a way that's going to fit well for the owners, because the condominiums are not reviewed by a city. And so from that standpoint, I think along with the fact that the cities are now told you have to do 3 dwelling units or more in their single family zones, it's creating a gold rush opportunity for people to be able to look at, okay, all of a sudden now I can do 3, maybe 4 or 5 if I'm near the transit, or even 6. And so what does that give me the opportunity to do? How does that unlock the potential of my property? And I think certain words that come to my mind in terms of things to be in the right state of mind is, one, paradigm shifting. You got to be willing to pivot a little bit of your understanding in real estate to go, we're in an uncharted territory. That is also the pioneering thing, right? We're going places we haven't been before.
For sure.
Borrowing knowledge from what we have in the past that's informative and helpful, and discarding things that don't really apply anymore. So there's the pioneering perspective. And then, like I said, the paradigm shifting is also, I think it's important to get into a mind space that says, this is a new space that's addressing very important needs in terms of affordable and opportunity for available housing. And so being willing to think creatively about how can we set these up. I used to talk about HOAs for all these projects in a way that minimized them as much as possible. I would say things like, these HOAs only have 2 things in the budget, right? So very little to do. It's almost like it's not there. My purpose in doing that was to help people not be afraid of saying, I'm buying a condominium unit that's kind of like a subdivision, but it has an HOA. What is that going to mean? The city of Bothel's mayor was at a panel where we were discussing these things, and he talked about visiting a site that had 6 dwelling units in one of these little condo communities, and how he felt like it was designed to have a sense of community around it. And he said one of the things that happens in the cities, in the urban cities, is they're so densely populated that somehow people's mindset is to become very separate, and they get very anxious and lonely, and they're living in their spaces. They don't know their neighbors. They don't know who they are. They don't know their phone numbers or their names. And though they're right there on top of one another in these urban spaces, we don't even know who our neighbors are. And one thing that got me thinking about when he talked about the community that it created is that, having done all these HOA transition meetings with new homeowners, many of which in their 20s or 30s that are kind of getting into the entry-level market and buying these daddies and ADUs, is how many times in these meetings when we're on Zoom or in-person meeting and talking about this HOA is that while it is very minimal and only has 2 or 3 things to do, it's a touch point with your neighbor. Say, hey, we're going to file a tax return in April. Hey, we're going to pay the $10 fee to the Secretary of State next month. And in doing that, oh, by the way, I'm going to be on vacation. Could you get my garbage out to the curb? When we're moving into these places, sometimes they haven't even met each other yet, and they're on the Zoom call for the first time going, oh, hi, neighbor, I think I saw you drive up the other day, or maybe something's happened in the neighborhood. Somebody's going around stealing packages or something, and you're like, hey, there's an immediate need of something going on that we should be on the lookout for something that's a safety issue or whatever.
Yeah.
Just having that touch point where they're in your phone, maybe you've got a little social media private page you've created for your little community there, or maybe some other platform that you're using, but it's real-time communication with your neighbor who you then get to know. And maybe you don't want a real intimate, close relationship with your neighbor. You can keep it to a minimum, that's fine. But maybe you also find some new friends and a little community, and people kind of look after one another, which creates a whole different way of looking at society and community.
Right. And you know what also it does? It also melts the Seattle freeze, or it's the Seattle freeze, because I get so many clients there, they swear by this, and they move to town for a new job, and everybody's like this.
Yes, we don't look at each other, say hello, there's no greeting.
It's like, it's ridiculous, but.
And what a great opportunity with something so minimal as a small little HOA with a couple tiny tasks to just open up a communication line that you can take it for what you want and make it into something more if it works for you. If not, that's fine. But it does create, I think, even a shift and a change in how we live together with our neighbors.
That's right. So many optimistic things coming from this. 1, homeowners could make gold, and lots of it. 2, it opens up more housing for people who can't afford it. 3, it socially, I don't see any downfalls other than
change.
Sure, there's change, and everybody resists that.
Everybody resists change.
Yeah, there will probably be a few negative bellies that don't want to, they're like, I like things the way they were.
Right.
So we'll get that too. But
those are the same people that complain about the traffic and complain about the crime and complain about not knowing your neighbors and all the things. And it's like, well, you can complain about the way things are because you don't want to see things change. But ultimately, in order to make things better and have any progress, there has to be change.
Right. Yep. Anything else we should say? Any other kickers you want to throw at people?
I think we've covered the bulk of it. I would just say if somebody's questioning, I want to learn more about this, I would say get involved in educational opportunities. There's a lot of different things. If you Google DADUs and ADUs and condos, you'll find that there's different seminars, there's different continuing education credit classes that are being taken. There's things that you can read. We've got YouTube videos out there. We're launching a new website in the next 2 weeks that's going to have also little small clips like TikToks and Reels and things that will just give you little pieces about the HOA or the condo, or the names that we're using. And we've already got a few of those that are out there right now. Folks want to look for those. They're already there, but we're going to integrate them all into our new website in the next week or 2. And so I think just having a hunger for education and continual learning curve.
What's your website?
It's www.wilsonlawgroupwa.com. WA being WA.
Okay, so you'll have all sorts of little snippets on education. Start the learning curve off gently.
Yeah, take your time. The one great thing about all this stuff that you'll find, as much as it's so steep and it sounds so overwhelming, and the reason why I love talking about it and get so passionate about it is that once you've built the building blocks, though, you've created a foundation, and then you're just kind of creating nuanced, new ways of looking at things, but you don't have to revisit the whole foundation every time. This is a mountain at first to get your mind wrapped around certain things, but I think even in a couple hours, you'll be able to develop a pretty good foundational thing to where you'll be able to navigate through this stuff pretty well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Well, I really appreciate all of your time and all of your expertise on this. So very, very much so. So
glad to do it. Thank you for having me.
Anybody has questions, he's the guy. Thanks, Terrence.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.